Sometimes the best intentions carry us straight into storms we never saw coming. The idea was born on a quiet Wednesday morning, in the middle of our usual routine. Curtis scrolling on his phone, Sophie tracing shapes in her cereal, and me forcing down coffee like it was fuel for survival. Rebecca had been gone 3 days already, with 4 still ahead, her longest consulting trip yet. The house was missing her laughter, her voice, her presence. That's when I said it out loud. What if we flew to Boston to surprise Mom? Sophie's head shot up instantly, eyes wide, glowing as if Christmas had come early. Curtis even looked up, which for a teenager was no small thing. That'd actually be pretty cool, he muttered, and my heart leapt. I pictured Rebecca's face, confusion melting into joy, maybe tears, that laugh I hadn't heard in days. By noon, the plan had teeth. I called work, arranged Friday off, emailed the school, booked 3 tickets. Bags began to fill, Sophie humming as she packed her stuffed bunny, Curtis pretending indifference but sneaking glances at flight info. I tried Rebecca again, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Kids miss you, love you." No reply. Strange, but I told myself she was buried in meetings. That night, Sophie whispered, "Daddy, do you think Mommy will cry when she sees us?" I kissed her forehead. "Happy tears, sweetheart." I didn't admit what I already felt. That somewhere inside me, a knot had begun to twist, faint but steady, as if warning me that surprises don't always end in smiles. The flight to Boston was short on miles and long on silence. Curtis retreated behind his headphones, a small fortress with bass-heavy walls. Sophie filled the gaps with breathless plans, what she'd say first, what she'd show Rebecca, how she'd measure the happy tears. I checked my phone too often, the screen a flat, patient mirror. Voicemail again. A text read, "Delivered," and stayed there, stubborn as a closed door. Logan smelled like antiseptic and coffee. The rental counter lost our reservation. The line moved in tiny, apologetic inches. By the time we rolled toward downtown, the sky was thinning into evening, and the city's windows were catching fire. "Can we eat before we see Mom?" Sophie asked. "Maybe we can all eat together," I said, and gripped the wheel a little tighter than necessary. The hotel lobby greeted us with chilled air and soft carpets that erased our footsteps. I told the front desk our name and asked for Rebecca's room. The clerk smiled, typed, and said she'd try to connect us. 1 ring? 2? 3? Nothing. "She might be in a meeting," I offered, hearing how practiced it sounded. The clerk handed over our keys. "You're in 732. Mrs. Anderson is in 718, she said, then hesitated, as if a thought had slipped past the velvet rope of discretion. "Her reservation shows a second guest." My mouth shaped a quick, dismissive story. A colleague, a double booking, a glitch. But something colder slid under my ribs. Rebecca's firm never doubled up rooms. That was a point of pride. Upstairs, I settled the kids, cracked a joke about ice, and stepped into the hushed hallway. The carpet swallowed my steps as I stopped at 718. I knocked lightly, waited, knocked again, harder. On the other side, faint music breathed through the door, followed by a quick, muffled laugh that didn't belong to my wife. I froze, hands still against the door, pulse hammering in my ears. The laugh was low, distinctly male, and it cut through me sharper than any blade. I typed a message with clumsy fingers. "I'm outside, open up." For a moment, silence pressed back. Then footsteps, hurried, unsteady. The door cracked open just enough to reveal Rebecca. Hair tousled, cheeks flushed, wrapped in a hotel robe. Her expression flickered from shock to fear, then settled into something worse, annoyance. "Michael, what are you doing here?" she hissed, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door almost shut behind her. "The kids and I flew out to surprise you," I said, the words tasting bitter. "They're down the hall waiting to see their mom." Her eyes widened. "The kids are here?" She glanced over her shoulder, nervous, as if the room itself might betray her. "Who's in there, Becca?" My voice was low, steady in a way that scared even me. "It's not what you think," she whispered. The door opened wider. A man stepped out, buttoning his shirt, tall and fit, early 40s. His voice was casual, too casual. "Everything okay, Becca?" The world tilted. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, my tone stripped of everything but steel. He hesitated, looked at her, then at me. "Trevor, from the Chicago office." I didn't know she was married. He grabbed his jacket, avoiding my eyes. I should go. I stared at Rebecca, waiting for denial, explanation, anything. All I got was silence. And in that silence, 17 years of marriage cracked like glass dropped on stone. Trevor slipped past me, muttering something that dissolved into the carpeted hallway. His footsteps faded toward the elevator, leaving Rebecca and me in a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. She wouldn't meet my eyes. 17 years, Becca," I whispered, though the words came out harsher than I intended. 17 years, and this is what I walk into? "It's not like that," she said quickly, her voice fraying at the edges. "You don't understand." "Then help me," I shot back. "Explain why our kids flew across the country to surprise you, only to find you with another man." Her lips trembled. "You should have called first," she blurted, as though the problem was timing, as though I had ruined her secret. The audacity of it twisted something deep inside me. "Called first," my laugh was sharp and empty. "That's your defense?" "Keep your voice down," she snapped, eyes darting toward the hallway. "The kids." "Don't you dare use them as a shield," I cut in. My hands were trembling, though I wasn't sure if it was anger or grief. Probably both. She took a step closer, reaching for my arm, but I pulled back. The distance between us never felt wider. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "A one-time thing." I shook my head, choking back the storm rising in my throat. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Becca. This was a choice." Behind me, down the hall, I pictured Sophie bouncing on the bed, waiting to leap into our mother's arms. I pictured Curtis, sharper than his years, already suspicious. And I realized, in a few minutes, she would walk into that room, paste on a smile, and pretend nothing had happened. And I would have to decide whether to play along. The walk back to our room felt endless, every step weighed down by a truth I couldn't yet name aloud. My hand shook on the keycard, but when the lock clicked green, I forced my face into something close to normal. "Did you find Mom?" Sophie bounced off the bed, eyes shining. "She'll be here in a few minutes," I managed, my voice steady only because it had to be. "Was she surprised?" she pressed. "Oh, she was surprised," I said, the words sticking in my throat like splinters. Curtis hadn't moved from his spot on the bed, phone in his hands, though I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and searching. He didn't ask anything, not yet, but the silence between us was louder than Sophie's excitement. "Room service," I suggested, desperate for distraction. "Burgers, fries, maybe even chocolate cake?" "Yes," Sophie clapped her hands. "Mommy will eat with us, right?" Before I could answer, a knock rattled the door. Sophie squealed and rushed to open it. Rebecca stood there, transformed. Hair neat, makeup fresh, a professional smile fixed in place. If I hadn't seen her minutes earlier in a robe, flustered beside another man, I might have believed this version of her. "Mommy!" Sophie hurled herself into her arms. Rebecca hugged her, murmured endearments, then looked at me over her daughter's head. Her eyes begged silently, "Play along." Curtis only muttered, "Hey, Mom," his tone flat. Rebecca kissed his hair, pretending not to notice the frost in his voice. "I can't believe you're all here," she said brightly, as though this were the happiest coincidence. For Sophie, it was enough. For Curtis and me, the lie already hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Sophie was chattering nonstop, recounting every detail of our trip: the flight, the taxi ride, the hotel lobby. Rebecca smiled and nodded in all the right places, but her eyes kept flicking toward me, searching for mercy I couldn't give. When the room service tray rolled in, Sophie clapped her hands like it was Christmas morning. "Now we can all eat together!" she exclaimed. Rebecca's smile faltered just for a breath. "Sweetheart, I can't stay long. I have an important client dinner tonight." The words landed like stones. Sophie's face crumpled. "But we came all this way. You can't leave." "I know, honey." Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair, her voice trembling with effort. "Tomorrow, I'll be all yours. We'll do anything you want." I barked out a short laugh before I could stop myself, disguising it with a cough. Sophie didn't notice, but Curtis did. His eyes cut toward me, sharp and knowing. Rebecca turned to me then, her smile stretched thin. "Mike, can I talk to you? Just for a moment?" Curtis rolled his eyes. "Real subtle, Mom," he muttered, sinking deeper into the bed. I followed her into the hallway, leaving the door cracked. Her mask slipped the second we were alone. "You can't tell them," she whispered fiercely. "Not yet, please." I stared at her, hardly recognizing the woman in front of me. "So I'm supposed to lie for you now? Pretend this dinner is about clients, not the man I just saw in your room?" "Trevor won't be there," she snapped, then softened, almost pleading. "I need this account. Millions are on the line." I shook my head slowly. "Your career's still thriving at least. Too bad our marriage isn't." Her eyes filled, but I'd already turned away, back toward the children, back to the only truth left standing. When I stepped back inside, Sophie was perched on the bed, bouncing with restless energy, while Curtis sat slouched, his phone in hand but his gaze locked on me. He didn't look away as I crossed the room. "Is Mom staying for dinner?" Sophie asked, hope still clinging to her voice. "Not tonight, sweetheart. She has to work. But tomorrow? Tomorrow's all ours." Her shoulders slumped, disappointment etched across her small face. "But we surprised her," she whispered, almost to herself. "I know," I said, forcing warmth into my voice, "and she loved the surprise. She'll make it up to you." Curtis finally spoke, his tone low but edged with steel. "Sure, tomorrow." He didn't believe it, and we both knew why. We ate in silence, the food tasteless, every clink of cutlery louder than words. Sophie recovered first, as kids do, pointing at the fries like treasures. "Dad, after we eat, can we go see the harbor? Emma said there are lights and boats and everything." Her eyes begged me to say yes, and I did. "Of course, Princess, we'll go after dinner." Later, when the city air wrapped around us and Sophie skipped ahead, Curtis fell into step beside me. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "She's cheating, isn't she?" The words nearly knocked the breath from my chest. I stumbled, caught myself, and glanced at him. His face was set, older than his years. "Tell me the truth, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore." I swallowed hard, the harbor light shimmering in my vision. "Yes," I admitted softly, "I think she is." Curtis nodded once, jaw tight, as if he'd already known. Figured. And with that single word, childhood slipped a little further from his face. We walked in silence for a while, Sophie darting ahead to the railing, squealing in every passing boat. Curtis kept his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched against more than the chill. "How long?" he asked finally, voice flat like he was talking about the weather. "I don't know," I admitted. "I only found out tonight." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I noticed, the late nights, the trips, the way she was always on her phone. Guess I just didn't want to believe it." My chest tightened. Had he seen what I refused to see?
Had I been so blind while my son carried the truth alone? I should have talked to you, I said quietly. Curtis shrugged. Wouldn't have changed anything. She made her choice. He kicked at a loose stone, sent it skittering across the pavement. What happens now? You two getting divorced? The word hit like a punch, even if it was one I'd already tasted in my own thoughts. I don't know yet, I admitted honestly. But whatever happens between your mom and me, nothing changes how much we love you and Sophie. That's the one thing you can count on. He scoffed, bitterness flickering through his voice. If she loved us, she wouldn't have done this. Ahead of us, Sophie waved wildly. "Daddy, Curtis, come look! This boat has a helicopter on it!" I forced a smile, called back, "Be right there, sweetheart." Curtis fell silent again, but when I slipped an arm around his shoulders, he didn't pull away. For the first time in years, he leaned into me, just slightly, as if saying, "We'll get through this, somehow." Back at the hotel, Sophie was heavy with sleep, her head resting on my shoulder as we rode the elevator up. Curtis stood beside me, quiet, his jaw set in that same hard line I'd seen on men twice his age. When the doors slid open, my heart sank. Rebecca was waiting outside our room, arms crossed, her expression sharp with irritation. But the second she spotted Sophie, her face softened into false concern. "Where have you been? I've been calling for hours," she said, stepping closer. "We went to see the harbor," I answered evenly, shifting Sophie in my arms. "I left my phone in the room." Curtis brushed past her without a word, swiped the key card, and disappeared inside. Rebecca flinched at the rejection, but I didn't stop. "What did you tell him?" she hissed once the door clicked shut behind our son. "The truth," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in, my voice low but unyielding. "You gave up your right to manage this story the second you brought someone else into your hotel room." Sophie stirred against me, murmuring, "Daddy, why are you and Mommy fighting?" Rebecca's eyes filled, and she pasted on her practiced smile, "We're not fighting, sweetie, just talking." I kissed Sophie's hair, whispering, "It's okay, princess. Time for bed." Inside, Curtis sat on his bed with his headphones on, pointedly ignoring his mother. I tucked Sophie in, her small fingers clutching her bunny as she drifted off. Rebecca hovered by the door, her voice low, urgent. "Mike, please, we need to talk, in my room." I looked at Curtis, his back rigid, his silence louder than words. "Will you be okay?" I asked. He slid one headphone off. "I'm fine. Go." His tone was flat, but his eyes told me the truth. Nothing about this was fine. I followed Rebecca down the hall, past the quiet doors and muted carpet, until we stopped at 718. She swiped her key card and the lock clicked open. Inside, the room was spotless, bed made, surfaces polished. No trace of Trevor remained, but the air itself felt tainted, heavy with something I couldn't scrub away. Rebecca closed the door softly and leaned against it, her shoulders sagging. "Curtis hates me," she whispered. "He's hurt. We all are." She crossed the bed and sat, hands twisting in her lap. "I made a terrible mistake, Mike. I don't even know what I was thinking." "That's just it," I replied, standing near the door, unwilling to step further inside. "You weren't thinking about us at all." She lifted her eyes, wet and pleading. "It was just this once, a moment of weakness." "Trevor didn't think so," I shot back. "He said he didn't even know you were married. How is that possible if this was the first time?" Her silence was the only answer I needed. "Tell me the truth," I demanded. "How long has this been going on?" Rebecca's face crumpled. "A few months. It started at a conference in Chicago. We texted, then it got out of hand." The room swayed. "So Boston isn't the first." She shook her head slowly, shame painted across every line of her face. I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself. "How many times?" "3, she whispered. "Only Trevor, no one else, I swear." 3 times too many, I muttered, the weight of her words pressed down until I could barely breathe.
17 years together, and in the space of a hallway and a confession, everything I thought I knew about my life was gone. Rebecca rose from the bed and took a hesitant step toward me, her voice trembling. "Mike, please, we can fix this. Therapy, a fresh start, whatever it takes. Don't throw away 20 years. I shook my head slowly, unable to meet her eyes. "You already did, the moment you chose him over us." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, reaching for my hand. "I felt invisible. You were always working, always with the kids. When was the last time you looked at me as anything more than their mother?" Anger flared hot in my chest. "Don't you dare put this on me. If you felt neglected, you could have said something. We could have worked on it. You didn't need to lie, to sneak around in hotel rooms." Her tears spilled then, streaking her carefully reapplied makeup. "I know I betrayed you. I know I broke us. But I can't lose you. I can't lose the kids." I let out a bitter laugh. "You should have thought of that before." She flinched at my tone, then dropped her gaze. "What happens now?" "I don't know," I admitted, my throat tight. "All I know is I can't stay in this room with you. Not tonight. Not after what I saw." I reached for the door handle, and she whispered, "Will you tell Sophie?" The question froze me. I turned back, meeting her tearful eyes. "Unlike you, I don't lie to our children, but I'll choose the moment, not you." And with that, I left her there in the sterile glow of the hotel room, carrying the unbearable truth like a weight chained to my chest. Back in our room, the lights were dim, the air heavy with the smell of fries and ketchup. Sophie was already asleep, curled around her stuffed bunny, her chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. For a moment, I envied her innocence, the way dreams still shielded her from everything waiting outside. Curtis was awake, sitting on the edge of his bed with his headphones around his neck. He didn't look up when I entered, but his voice was sharp, clear. "We're leaving tomorrow, aren't we?" I hesitated, then nodded. "First flight out." His shoulders dropped in relief, though his face stayed guarded. "Good." I sat down across from him, lowering my voice. "Curtis, I'm sorry you had to see all this. Sorry you had to grow up faster than you should." He finally met my eyes. There was no blame there, only a kind of weary understanding, far too old for 15. "It's not your fault, Dad. You didn't cheat." The words struck deeper than he knew. "Still, you shouldn't have to carry this. I wanted to protect you from it." "Too late for that," he muttered, pulling out a loose thread in the blanket. Then softer, "What about Sophie? You gonna tell her?" I glanced at my daughter, sleeping soundly, still dreaming of tomorrow with her mom. "Not yet," I whispered. "She still thinks her mother hangs the moon. I'm not ready to take that away from her." Curtis gave a small nod, then slid his headphones back on, turning his face toward the wall. I lay awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled city outside. Between my son's silence and my daughter's fragile dreams, I realized no matter what I decided about Rebecca, the real choice had already been made. My only task now was to protect them, even if it meant losing everything else. Morning came too quickly, sunlight pushing through the thin hotel curtains. Sophie stirred first, rubbing her eyes, her voice still heavy with sleep. "Daddy, is today the day we get Mommy all to ourselves?" The question lodged in my throat. I forced a smile and brushed her hair back. "That's the plan, sweetheart." She grinned, already chattering about breakfast and boat rides. Curtis watched quietly from his bed, expression unreadable. He knew better. I packed our bags while Sophie bounced around the room, too excited to notice the tension thick as fog. Rebecca knocked just as I zipped the last suitcase. Sophie squealed, rushing to open the door. "Mommy!" She wrapped her arms around Rebecca's waist. Rebecca hugged her back, smiling brightly, as if nothing had happened. Curtis stayed seated, his greeting nothing more than a cold "Hey." Rebecca's smile faltered for a heartbeat, but she covered it with practiced ease.
I thought we could all get breakfast together, she said.
Sure, I answered, though my voice carried no warmth. At the restaurant, Sophie chattered through pancakes and orange juice, her laughter spilling over the table. Curtis played her part, nodding, smiling, asking questions. But beneath it all, her eyes kept darting to me, searching for any sign of forgiveness. Curtis caught every glance, his jaw tightening with each one. He stabbed at his food, silent, a storm barely contained. For Sophie, the morning was magic. For the rest of us, it was theater. Lines delivered, smiles rehearsed, and as I watched Rebecca laugh at a joke she didn't hear, I knew this performance couldn't last much longer. Sooner or later, the curtain would fall. After breakfast, Sophie tugged Rebecca's hand, begging her to come sightseeing. "Please, Mommy, we can go to the harbor again, and maybe the park." And Rebecca hesitated, her smile brittle. "Sweetheart, I can't today. I have another meeting, very important." Sophie's face fell, her excitement collapsing into a quiet frown. "But you promised." "I know, baby." She knelt, brushing Sophie's cheek. "Tomorrow, I swear. Just one more day." Sophie nodded slowly, though disappointment weighed on her small shoulders. Curtis leaned back in his chair, his voice flat. "Another meeting, huh? Must be a busy trip." The jab hit its mark. Rebecca's smile cracked, and for a moment raw guilt flickered in her eyes. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to answer. I pushed back from the table, gathering the check. "We'll manage. The kids and I can explore without you." Rebecca reached for my wrist, her grip tight. "Mike, please. Later, when they're resting, can we talk?" I pulled free gently but firmly. "We've talked. You just don't like what I said." Sophie slipped her hand into mine as we left, her little fingers warm and trusting. "Daddy, Mommy will come tomorrow, right?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile for her sake. "Tomorrow, sweetheart." Behind us, Rebecca stood frozen in the restaurant doorway, watching her family walk away without her. For Sophie, hope still sparkled like sunlight on water. For Curtis, hope had already drowned. And for me, each step away from her felt like confirmation of something I wasn't yet ready to say out loud. Our family was breaking, and no promise of tomorrow could fix it. The rest of the day I played tour guide, though my heart wasn't in it. Sophie led the charge, pointing at every statue, every fountain, every busker with wide-eyed wonder. She laughed at street performers, clapped at balloon animals, and made me take 100 photos on my phone. Curtis walked beside me, silent, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His eyes weren't on the sights, but on me, watching, measuring. By late afternoon, Sophie was tired but glowing. "This is the best trip ever, Daddy," she said, leaning against my arm as we walked back toward the hotel. I forced a smile, trying to absorb her joy like borrowed sunlight. In the elevator, she leaned on my shoulder, her voice dreamy. "Tomorrow, Mommy will come with us. She promised." Curtis shifted, let out a quiet scoff, and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Yeah, promises." Our room was quiet when we returned. Sophie collapsed on the bed, out in minutes, her bunny tucked under her chin. Curtis sat at the desk, staring out at the city lights. "Dad," he said finally, his voice low, "you're really gonna let her keep doing this? Lying to us, pretending nothing happened?" I rubbed a hand over my face. "I don't know yet, son. I'm still trying to figure out what comes next." Curtis turned to me, eyes sharp, too old for 15. "She made her choice. Don't let her drag Sophie down with it." The words cut deeper than he knew. In that moment, I realized my son wasn't just asking for truth. He was demanding I protect them, no matter the cost. And for the first time, I felt the decision beginning to take shape. That night, the city hummed outside our window, but inside the room, the silence was crushing. Curtis stretched out on his bed with his headphones on, pretending to scroll, though I knew he wasn't hearing a thing. I sat by the window, staring at the skyline, wondering how many lights and how many buildings were hiding stories like ours, secrets that threatened to tear families apart. Around midnight, a knock came at the door. Not loud, but steady. Rebecca. I opened it just enough to step into the hallway, careful not to wake Sophie. She stood there, eyes rimmed red, makeup gone, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Mike, please," she whispered. "Don't shut me out. We need to talk." "I already know everything I need to," I said. "No, you don't." Her voice cracked. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed you, but don't end us like this, not after 20 years. "Rebecca," I said, my throat raw, "you ended it when you let him into your room, into our life." Tears streaked down her cheeks. It wasn't about him, it was about me, feeling empty, feeling unseen. I made the worst choice possible, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose the kids. I clenched my jaw, every muscle screaming to either yell or collapse. It's too late to choose what you want. Now it's about what they need. And right now, they need truth more than promises. For a moment, she just stood there, broken, her hand reaching for mine and finding only air. I turned back toward the door. "Go to bed, Becca. Tomorrow, we go home." And with that, I left her standing in the hallway, the silence between us louder than any words. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, the weight of decision already pressing on my chest. Curtis was awake too, sitting cross-legged on his bed, eyes sharp and tired. Sophie slept soundly between us, her bunny tucked under her chin, breathing soft and steady. I moved quietly, packing the last of our things. Curtis finally spoke. "You're serious about leaving today?" "Yes," I said. "First flight home." He gave a short nod, relief flickering across his face. "Good. She doesn't deserve us hanging around while she pretends." I wanted to correct him, to remind him she was still his mother, but the words stuck, because in that moment I agreed. When Sophie stirred, I pasted on my gentlest smile. "Rise and shine, princess. Big travel day ahead." Her eyes blinked open. "Are we going to surprise Mommy again?" I hesitated, then kissed her forehead. "Not this time, sweetheart. We're going home." Confusion clouded her face. "But Mommy promised." "She has to finish her work," I interrupted softly. "She'll be home in a few days." It was a lie, and it burned on my tongue, but I couldn't shatter her world just yet. At the airport, Rebecca was waiting by security, her expression hollow from a sleepless night. Sophie ran to hug her, clinging tight, asking why she couldn't come with us. Rebecca's answer was shaky. "Work, honey, just a little longer." Curtis barely touched her shoulder, in a stiff one-armed hug before walking ahead without looking back. I met Rebecca's eyes only once. She mouthed, "Please," but there was nothing left to say. The flight home felt like drifting through limbo. Sophie pressed her face to the window, pointing out clouds shaped like castles and dragons, her voice filled with wonder. I answered with forced enthusiasm, each smile a mask to shield her from the truth. She deserved at least one more day of innocence. Curtis, meanwhile, kept his headphones on, staring out at nothing. Every so often he glanced at me, his eyes sharp, unreadable. There was no accusation in them, only a quiet demand. Don't let this happen again. Don't let her hurt us more. I hadn't slept the night before, and now exhaustion pressed down on me like lead. Yet my mind raced. How do you explain betrayal to a child? How do you untangle 20 years of history without tearing the family in two? When the plane began its descent, Sophie turned to me, her voice hopeful. "Will Mommy be waiting at home?" I swallowed, forcing a steady tone. "Not this time, princess. She has to finish her job first. But she'll come back soon." Curtis snorted softly, not looking away from the window. Sophie frowned, confusion flickering across her face, but before she could ask more, the wheels hit the tarmac with a heavy jolt. As we walked off the plane, Sophie slipped her small hand into mine, trusting and warm. Curtis walked on my other side, tall, guarded, already carrying more than he should. And in that moment I realized I couldn't save my marriage, but I could still save my children, and maybe, just maybe, that had to be enough.
The days after Boston blurred together, but the silence in our house was deafening. Sophie asked about Rebecca constantly, tugging at my sleeve, wanting to know when Mommy would walk through the door. Each time, I gave her the same answer, soon, though the word tasted like ash. Curtis avoided the subject altogether. He buried himself in homework, basketball practice, anything that kept him out of the house. But when we crossed paths, he would give me a look that said everything. Don't let her back in like nothing happened. 3 nights later, Rebecca finally returned. She wheeled her suitcase into the foyer like she had 100 times before. Sophie squealed, running to her, wrapping herself around her waist. Rebecca hugged her tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. Curtis stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, face stone. "Hey, buddy," Rebecca said softly, almost pleading. "Hi," he muttered, and turned away, retreating to his room. The slam of his door echoed through the house. Rebecca looked at me then, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Mike, can we talk?" I studied her, this woman I had loved since college, this stranger I barely recognized. "We'll talk," I said quietly, "but not tonight. Tonight the kids need normal." She nodded, defeated, and went upstairs to unpack. I stood alone in the living room, Sophie's laughter drifting from the kitchen, Curtis's music pounding faintly from behind his closed door. And I realized normal was gone. Whatever came next, we were standing at the edge of something entirely different.
A week passed, and the tension in the house thickened until it was almost unbearable. Rebecca tried to slip back into routine, making Sophie's lunches, asking Curtis about school, leaving coffee for me in the mornings. But her efforts felt rehearsed, like lines from a script she no longer believed in. Curtis gave her nothing. He answered in shrugs, in single syllables, or not at all. Every time she tried to touch his arm, he pulled away. The distance between them grew wider each day, a canyon she couldn't cross. Sophie, though, still clung to her. She didn't see the cracks, or maybe she refused to. To her, Mommy was home again, and that was enough. She sat at the kitchen table one night, drawing all 3 of us holding hands under a sun that smiled. She showed it proudly. "Look, Daddy. Look, Mommy. We're happy again." Rebecca's smile wavered, her eyes glistening, but she praised the picture and taped it to the fridge. Curtis didn't even glance up. Later that night, after Sophie was in bed, Rebecca cornered me in the living room. "Mike," she said, voice breaking, "I can't stand this. The way he looks at me. The way you look at me. I know I ruined everything, but please, don't let it end like this." I stared at her, searching for the woman I used to know. "It already ended in Boston," I said quietly. "We're just living in the aftershocks now." Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, covering her eyes with her hands. For a moment, I almost reached for her. But then I remembered Trevor's voice, the way he said he didn't know she was married. And the distance between us felt permanent. 2 weeks later, the house no longer felt like ours. We moved around each other like uneasy tenants, careful not to collide. Sophie remained blissfully unaware, her world still orbiting around school projects and bedtime stories. But Curtis carried the truth like armor, and every time he looked at his mother, the weight of it pressed harder. One evening, as Sophie colored at the table, Curtis cornered me in the garage. "Dad, you can't keep this going," he said, his voice low but steady. It's tearing us apart. She pretends, you pretend, and Sophie's the only one who doesn't know." His words hit me like a hammer. I rubbed the back of my neck, exhausted. "I know, but she's 10. How do you tell a 10-year-old her mother betrayed us?" "She'll find out anyway," Curtis said. "Better from you than from watching it fall apart." I stared at my son, 15 years old, and already speaking like someone who had seen too much, and maybe he had. That night, after Sophie was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table across from Rebecca. Between us lay a silence sharp enough to cut. Finally, I spoke. "This isn't working. Not for me, not for Curtis. Even Sophie will see it soon." Her hands trembled around her mug. "So, what are you saying?" I took a deep breath, the words tasting of finality. "I'm saying we can't go back, not after what you did. We need to start talking about separation." Rebecca's eyes filled, but she didn't argue. She only whispered, "I was afraid you'd say that." And in that moment, I knew, fear or not, the path had already been chosen. The next day, I called an attorney. Not to file immediately, but to understand, to prepare. The word divorce still burned my throat, but pretending we weren't heading there was worse. Rebecca noticed the change in me that evening. She cornered me in the bedroom, her voice tight with panic. "You talked to someone, didn't you?" "Yes," I admitted. "I needed to know what comes next." Her face crumpled. "Mike, please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can fight for us." I shook my head. "You made a choice, Rebecca, and now I have to make one too." She grabbed my hand, desperation spilling out. "I'll do anything. Therapy? Counseling? I'll quit traveling. Just don't end us." Her words should have softened me. They would have once. But all I could see was that hotel hallway. Trevor's voice, the way she looked at me. Annoyed, not ashamed. That image had seared itself into me, permanent as a scar. "I don't trust you," I said flatly. "And without trust, there's nothing left." Rebecca broke then, sobbing into her hands. I watched, hollow, knowing once I would have reached to hold her. Now I just stood there, feeling the last threads of our marriage unravel. Later that night, Curtis found me on the porch, staring into the dark. He sat beside me, silent for a long time, then asked, "You're leaving her, aren't you?" I exhaled slowly. "I think so, son." He nodded once, as if confirming what he already knew. "Good. We'll be okay, Dad." His certainty startled me, but as the night closed in, I clung to it, because maybe he was right. Maybe we would. 3 weeks later, the papers were on the kitchen table. I hadn't signed yet, but the weight of them filled the house like smoke. Rebecca sat across from me, hands folded tightly, knuckles white. She looked older than I remembered, like the secret had carved years into her face. Sophie sat nearby, drawing again, humming softly, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just a few feet away. She looked up once, beamed at both of us, then went back to her crayons. I envied her world, untouched, still painted in bright colors. Curtis wasn't home. Basketball practice, or maybe just an excuse to stay away. He'd hardly spoken to Rebecca in days. When he did, his words were clipped, mechanical, a language of distance she couldn't break. Rebecca's voice trembled as she finally spoke. "Do you hate me, Mike?" I looked at her, at the woman I'd built 2 decades of memories with. "No," I said quietly, "but I don't recognize you anymore." Her eyes welled. If I could take it back, I would. I shook my head. Some things don't rewind. Some choices change the story forever. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the scratch of Sophie's drawing. I glanced at her picture, 4 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. She still drew us as a whole family. Rebecca followed my gaze, her lips trembling. "For them," she whispered. "Can we at least try?" My throat tightened. "I am trying for them, but trying for them doesn't mean staying with you." Her face collapsed, but she didn't argue. In that moment, with divorce papers between us and Sophie's drawing on the fridge, the truth settled like stone. Our family would survive, but it would never be the same. The night stretched long after that conversation. Rebecca retreated upstairs, and I stayed in the living room, the unsigned papers staring back at me like a verdict waiting to be read aloud. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of Sophie turning in her sleep. Curtis came home late, dropping his backpack by the door without a word. He glanced at the papers on the table, then at me. His expression hardened, but there was no surprise. "So, it's happening," he said flatly. I rubbed my temples. "It looks that way." Curtis crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "Good. She needs to see we're not just going to forgive and forget." His anger was sharp, but beneath it I could hear the hurt, the kind that eats away at you if you don't face it. "She's still your mom," I said softly. He looked at me, eyes blazing. "She stopped being my mom the second she chose him over us." I wanted to argue, but the truth was I thought the same thing more than once. Still, Sophie's face flashed in my mind, her drawings, her laughter. She wasn't ready to lose her mother, not the way Curtis already had. "Curtis," I said, choosing my words carefully, "don't let this make you bitter. Don't let it turn you into someone who can't trust. You're stronger than that." He didn't answer, just grabbed his backpack again and headed upstairs. The thud of his door closing echoed like a gavel. I sat alone in the dark afterward, the silence pressing in. And for the first time since Boston, I realized this wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about protecting my children from the wreckage that followed. The following weekend, I took Sophie and Curtis to the park. It was something I hadn't done in weeks, maybe months, and I could feel how badly they both needed it. Sunlight, open space, something that wasn't wrapped in tension. Sophie darted to the swings instantly, her laughter spilling into the air, while Curtis lingered beside me, hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets. "Feels weird without her here," he muttered, watching Sophie pump her legs higher. I followed his gaze. "Yeah, but sometimes weird is better than pretending." He didn't reply, but I caught the flicker of relief in his eyes. He sat on the bench with me, and for the first time in a long while, we talked, really talked, about his team, about his classes, about the future. He told me he wanted to study architecture, that he was tired of carrying the anger but didn't know how to set it down. I told him, "You don't have to figure it out all at once. Just don't carry it alone. I'm here, always." His eyes watered, but he blinked it back quickly. "Thanks, Dad." When Sophie finally ran back to us, her cheeks red and her hair wild, she climbed onto my lap and hugged me tight. "This is fun. We should do this every weekend." Curtis gave a small smile. "Yeah, we should." And sitting there, with one child pressed against me and the other slowly opening his heart again, I realized something. Even as the marriage dissolved, the family didn't have to. What was left could still be strong, if I chose to fight for it. That day, for the first time in months, I felt hope. The hope from that day lingered, but so did the reality. Back at the house, Rebecca seemed to sense her place shrinking. She still tried, packing Sophie's lunches with little notes, asking Curtis about his games, but her efforts only floated on the surface. Neither child reached for her the way they once had. One evening, she approached me in the kitchen as I loaded the dishwasher. "Mike," she said quietly, "I don't want to be just erased from their lives, or yours." I closed the dishwasher slowly, turning to face her. "No one's erasing you. You'll always be their mother. But things are changing, and we have to accept that." Her eyes glistened. "What about us?" I exhaled, feeling the heaviness in my chest. "Us is already gone, Rebecca. we're just trying to figure out how to live with what's left." She flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, "I'm scared, Mike. I don't know who I am without this family." For a moment, I almost reached for her. The old instinct to comfort flickered, but it died just as quickly. "You'll have to figure that out," I said softly, just like I'm figuring it out. Later that night, I found Curtis sitting outside on the porch steps staring at the dark yard. I sat beside him, neither of us speaking at first. Finally, he said, "It's weird. I don't even mess her. Isn't that messed up?" I shook my head. "It's not messed up, it's just how you feel. Feelings don't follow rules." He glanced at me. "Do you miss her?" I thought about it, the question heavier than I expected. I miss who I thought she was, but I don't miss the lie. Curtis nodded slowly as if that answered something inside him, and together we sat in silence, father and son, learning how to breathe again in the aftermath of betrayal. The day finally came when I signed the papers. My hand shook only once, halfway through my name, but by the time the pen lifted, there was no turning back. A strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not grief, but something in between, like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing you survived the fall. Rebecca wasn't home when it happened. I'd chosen it that way. Curtis was at school. Sophie had a friend's. The silence of the house wrapped around me as I slid the papers into the envelope and set it near the door. That evening, Rebecca noticed. She stood in the doorway staring at the sealed envelope, her lips parting as though she might speak, but no words came. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, I saw her not as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone utterly lost. When she finally looked up, her voice was thin. "So that's it?" I met her gaze. "That's it." She nodded slowly, as if each movement cost her strength. Without another word, she went upstairs. Later, Sophie climbed into my lap while I sat in the living room. She held up a drawing, a house, a sun, and 3 stick figures instead of 4. "This is us now," she said matter-of-factly. The simplicity of her acceptance pierced me deeper than any argument could. I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, this is us now." Curtis joined us soon after, dropping his backpack on the floor. He looked at Sophie's drawing, then at me. "It's better this way," he said quietly. And for the first time, I believed him. The wound was still raw, but somewhere inside, healing had begun. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of our new life slowly began to take shape. The mornings were quieter, simpler. No tense glances across the kitchen, no forced small talk. Just me getting Sophie ready for school, Curtis grabbing his breakfast on the way out, the 3 of us moving like a team learning a new play. Rebecca had moved into a small apartment nearby. She picked Sophie up on weekends, tried to coax Curtis into joining, but he always refused. Sometimes I worried about the distance hardening into something permanent, but I knew pushing him would only drive him further away. One Friday evening, Sophie came back from her mom's with a small plant in her hands. "Mom says it's for you," she explained, setting it on the kitchen counter. A green sprout in a clay pot, fragile but alive. I stared at it for a long time after Sophie went to bed. It was Rebecca's way of reaching across the gap, of saying something she couldn't put into words. Maybe it meant she still hoped for forgiveness, or maybe it was just her way of staying present in a house that no longer belonged to her. Curtis noticed it the next morning. "You're not actually going to keep that, are you?" he asked, scowling. I hesitated. "It's just a plant." He crossed his arms. "It's her plant." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's Sophie's now. She wanted it here. That's reason enough." Curtis didn't argue, but he didn't look convinced either. Still, when I left for work on Monday, I caught him watering it, muttering under his breath. And for the first time, I wondered if even anger, in its own twisted way, was part of keeping her close.
Spring arrived, and with it came a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time.
The days grew warmer, the windows stayed open, and laughter returned to the house in small, cautious bursts. Sophie decorated the kitchen with drawings of flowers and suns, while Curtis surprised me by spending more time at home instead of vanishing with his friends. One evening, after dinner, we sat on the porch together. Sophie played with chalk on the steps, drawing crooked rainbows, while Curtis leaned against the railing. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked suddenly, his tone guarded. I glanced at him. Starting over how? You know, dating, meeting someone new. The question caught me off guard. "I haven't really thought about it," I admitted. "Right now it's about us, about making sure you and Sophie are okay." Curtis looked away, as if embarrassed. "Just saying, you don't have to be alone forever. You deserve better than what she did." His words stirred something inside me, a faint spark I hadn't let myself feel. The idea of moving forward, not just surviving, but living, was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Sophie interrupted then, holding up her rainbow drawing. "Look, Daddy, it's us walking under it." I smiled, pulling her close. "It's perfect." As the sun dipped behind the trees, I realized my children weren't just healing, they were helping me heal too. And maybe, just maybe, there was life waiting for us beyond the wreckage. For the first time in months, I felt the future calling, not with fear, but with possibility.
The final trace of winter seemed to vanish overnight. One Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and golden, and I woke with a feeling I hadn't known in years: peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from ignoring problems, but the kind that settles in when the storm has passed and you've survived it. Curtis was already up, sitting at the table with his sketchbook. I glanced over his shoulder and saw the beginnings of the building: arches, windows, clean lines. He caught me looking and smirked. "Don't say anything, Dad. It's not finished." "I wasn't going to," I replied, though pride swelled inside me. His dreams were taking shape, just like the rest of our lives. Sophie wandered in, hair messy, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She climbed into my lap and whispered, "Can we go to the park again today?" "Of course," I said. Later, as we walked under the wide open sky, I thought about everything we had endured: betrayal, anger, the shattering of a life we thought would last forever. Yet here we were, still standing, still moving forward. Rebecca was no longer the center of our story. She was a shadow lingering at the edges, a lesson etched into the past. The future belonged to me, Curtis, and Sophie, to the family we had become, forged not by perfection, but by resilience. As the kids ran ahead, Sophie's laughter echoing and Curtis calling after her, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. This was not the end of our story, but the beginning of a new one. And for the first time, I didn't just believe we would be okay. I knew it.